our role is like more of detective in a crime lab. So, but instead of investigating fingerprints or DNA, we investigate packets and films. So every anomaly, any unexpected disconnect, or any unexpected behavior is a clue. So today we are going to walk through some of the interesting protocol level bugs we have uncovered, and we are not just going to show what went wrong, but how we trace them the step by step and down to the protocol level. Just think of it, it's going to be like a revealing case files, and because each bug is in itself a whole story. So before we dive into the case files, we will just like to show how we work in QA, our testing framework. So basically, let's say if client is not getting connected or it roams incorrectly, we don't just jump to the conclusion, and we first move step by step and we narrow down all the possible causes, because we need to give the precise and reproducible scenarios to the developers. Now, after that, we first validate the test equipment through its logs. And because the logs will give the most of the story regarding memory compatibility, parallelly we check for the testing environment. Let's say here we are testing in the RF enclosure. We check for the leakaging signals, which can lead to, you can say, RSI levels. It can also impact the DUT. In case can the unnecessary beacon films. It can go for more channel utilization, and it will affect the overall performance, and so on factors. Secondly, we check for the station logs. It's a device sides, and it gives a client-side perspective, and where we see whether did it reject any authentication, or did it time out, or it is something it's not accepting, like station got time out, or it not send any right probe. Then we go for the AP side logs. That's the network side, because each and every AP have different version of stories. Let's say client say, I send authentication, but AP says, sorry, I never receive it. And here we know the most powerful tool we are looking for, that's a packet capture and sniffer, which help us to pinpoint any missing element, tag parameters, information element, or any mismatch keys. So, all right, we go to our first case, which is about failing in roaming because of using the 11-hour fast transition. So before going into that, like quick refresh. So what happens when client roams between the APs? We expect fast and smooth transition. And normally AP won't redo any full four-way handshake. Instead, the AP and client relies on something we call PMKID. And that's the pairwise master key identifier. So in simple words, think of it like it is a short ticket subtle, which proving that we already did hard work for authentication. In our roaming setup, the client is using the WPA3 SAE authentication method, and during the roam, client use the cache PMKID for smooth transition. Now, during that, the roaming, we saw it did not roam. And during our debugging, we found, we found some interesting things in the packet capture. So we went to association request, we went to IEEE 8.2.11 wireless management, and there we saw that the PMKID count field was enabled, and we were able to see the value, which is typically 16-byte hash. And it's just like client saying, okay, API say I am already authenticated, let's me fast forward. Now, on AP side, when we went to association response, we saw AP is simply denying it with the reason of failure saying, okay, it's an invalid PMKID. So with the end user perspective, it can be something like, okay, if someone is using Wi-Fi call, is on Wi-Fi call, it just get drop off. But from US QA perspective, it's a crystal clear invalid PMKID bug. So now we have similarly seen another issue, which is more on regarding VLAN assignment using MPSK while roaming towards the 6 GHz band. So before that, just for quick, what is MPSK? So MPSK is something which extends the WPA2 or WPA3 model, where one SSID can hold a table of PSKs, and instead of one, now, let's say one single SSID can hold the number of PSKs. Now, how it happens? So when client is trying to connect to any PSK1, let's say we have PSK1, PSK2, client is trying to connect to PSK1. Now, during the four-way handshake, the AP checks the message 2, and in the message 2, it checks for the MIC value, because MIC, then through MIC value, it's understood, okay, client is trying to this PSK. And after that, it goes for the VLAN mapping and it forwards the DSCP packets. So here what happened is, like, client initially connected to 2.4G and 5G band, and it got mapped to a correct VLAN as what we configured in the AP side. Now, but when it roamed to 6 GHz band, we saw the VLAN map packet got lost or untagged. So exactly what should be the behavior? So ideally, whenever we are mapping something, we should see in the DSCP offer packet that the under Ethernet header that 802.1q virtual LAN tag parameter should be present. But during our debugging, what we found is, as we are roaming towards the 6G band, and so the SA authentication was working fine, DSCP discover packets were broadcasting fine, but at the offer packet, we saw this 802.1q virtual LAN tag parameter was missing. And that's the reason the client was falling into the default VLAN, that is VLAN 1. So for as of now, we have covered the issues regarding the 11-hour roaming, the VLAN assignment. Similarly, we have encountered the other issues with other features, which are going to be covered by Maitri.
Hi everyone. We found one interesting issue regarding 802.11v. As we all know that 802.11v is a BSS transition management, which is designed in the Wi-Fi networks to roam the clients between the access points more seamlessly and more efficiently. Okay. Both client and AP will negotiate the 802.11v support during the initial connection to the management frames. So the process is pretty straightforward, where the client will request with a BTM query when there is a low RSSI or the client found any better AP, seeking the roaming suggestions from the access point. So the AP is expected to respond with a BTM request, which include the preferred candidate list as it is highlighted in the frame. It should be one, and it should include the neighbor reports which includes the BSS ID, channel number, and other details of the neighboring APs. So we found one interesting issue during the testing where client was requesting the BTM query, but AP was responding with a BTM request which has the preferred candidate list as 0, meaning it doesn't included any neighbor report in the request. So now the client has no idea where to roam. And during this situation, the roaming was failure, and it can lead into the even connection drops in the dense Wi-Fi environments. Moving on to the next bug, which turned out to be a quite critical one. This issue occurs when two clients with the same MAC address try to connect with the two different SSIDs on the same AP. So during this situation, the AP should detect the duplicacy of MAC and it should handle the situation gracefully. Either it should reject the second connection or it should disconnect from the first one. But this is not the situation which happened in our testing. The AP was hit on firmware level crash and it went into a continuous reboot state. So now you may wonder how realistic is this scenario in the real world deployments. So let me move with the two scenarios. One with a static MAC address. When two clients, let us take one user who always connects to the public Wi-Fi, which is with the open network. A attacker can sniff the Wi-Fi traffic and it can clone the same MAC address onto each device. Now both the clients are trying to connect to the same AP. At that time we can see the issue where AP will hit into a crash state. This will not impact only those two clients, but all the clients connected to that AP will get disconnected. Moving on to the randomization case, this issue turned out to be it happens very rarely. It could be the reasons where there is a bug in the randomization algorithm, or it can happen when there is a very crowded networks. So both will end up with the same MAC address, and when they are trying to connect to the same AP, but the AP will get crashed and all the users get disconnected. This is the AP logs we collected during the time of crash, where AP hit an assertion failure error. This means AP hit an unexpected condition which doesn't program to handle, and it went into a crash state which further went into a continuous reboot loop state. Moving on to the next bug, which is about the channel switch announcement. We all know that channel switch announcement will be used when the AP needs to change its channel. So this situation can occur in the scenarios like when ACS is triggered on the AP, or when AP detects a radar signal. In that situation, AP should move on to the leave the current operating channel and it should move to the other channels. So the expected behavior is when an AP decides to change the channel, it cannot jump immediately to other channel. So instead, it should, if it does, all the clients connected to that AP will lose its connectivity. So what the AP does, it will send a CSA indicating the clients that, hey, I'm moving to the new channel and here is my channel number. So here's my channel number and here are how many beacon intervals left before I switch. This will give enough time for the clients to decide and follow up with the new AP for the new channel. Under ideal conditions, it is expected that AP should send the CSA with some random number and it should decrement by 1 so that until it reaches 1, once it reaches 1, AP will switch the channel. During the testing, we found an issue where the probe response count was stuck at 20. It is expected the CSA count should be same in both beacon and probe response. When the probe response stuck at 20, the clients which are already connected may follow the beacon and it will switch the channel accordingly with the AP. But what about the clients which are probing or trying to connect during the time of CSA? They will see the station count as the CSA in the probe count as 20 and they might think there are still more beacon intervals left before the channel switch, and which may lead into the connection failures. But in reality, AP may be switching in 2 to 3 beacon intervals. So due to this, we found some connection failures and the clients were connecting only after the AP switched the channel. So these are the issues we found from our testing. We have few more observations which will be continued by Sirisha.
In the ever-evolving world of Wi-Fi, we come across new features and emerging standards. So Wi-Fi 7 has been recently introduced to us and there is an ongoing progress for Wi-Fi 8. From all this, we can say that there is no end to the innovation in Wi-Fi. As a part of this journey, we received a vendor access point which supports Wi-Fi 7. So to begin our evaluation, we started with basic client connectivity. For that, we use Intel VU200 client, which is installed in our LANForge Candela box. And surprisingly, it is getting connected in the previous standard, that is in HE mode instead of EHT mode. So as always, we took a packet capture during the client connectivity process and observed that both the devices are supporting EHT mode. Now, it's a bit more interesting, isn't it? There could be a lot of possibilities for this issue. It could be either from the client side or from the AP side. So to debug further, we connected a few more real Wi-Fi devices to the AP and observed that they are connecting in EHT mode. And from this, we can say it might be an issue from client side. But wait, we have done another scenario where we connected the same client to another vendor AP and observed that it is connecting in EHT mode without any issues. So from this, we concluded that it's an interoperability issue between the AP and the client. Next, to pinpoint exactly where the issue is happening, we compared the capabilities of both the vendors and observed that there is a difference in the EHT MCS and NSS bitmap fields. Here you can see the vendor A is indicating that all the clients within the BSS must support 4 spatial streams across all MCS ranges, whereas in vendor B, it's indicating that clients must support 1 spatial stream for lower MCS ranges. So due to this mismatch, client is facing issues in connecting to EHT mode. Later, when the vendor A changes its bitmap field to the same value as that of vendor B, client is getting connected successfully in EHT mode without any issues. So in this way, we started with basic client connectivity and ended up here. Now let's move on to another case file on 11K. So we all know usually clients do off-channel scanning in order to get the neighboring AP's info so that they could use that info in order to take good roaming decisions. So in our testing, we used, so this, with the introduction of this 11K feature, clients can make use of the same info in the form of neighbor reports. So in our testing, we used 2 tri-band APs in mesh, and we connected client to one of the APs, and the client requested for a neighbor report. Then the AP replied with a neighbor report response. Usually in neighbor report response, we contain all the neighboring AP's BSSID's info and the existing its own BSSID's info, except the one on which it is actually connected. So while analyzing the capabilities info provided by the AP, we observed that In 6 GHz band, as it is supported only from HE mode, this field is set to true and the remaining HT and VHT are set to false as expected. And in 2.4G as well, as the AP is capable of HE mode, all these parameters are set to true. But in 5G band, we observed that HT is set to false, though the AP is capable of that. So, due to this misinterpretation, if there are any legacy clients in the network, for example, Wi-Fi 4 and clients which are actually dual band capable, they could make wrong running decisions due to this misinterpretation. So this is the overall analysis for 11K. Next we have another one, 11R. As said by Yash previously, 11R helps clients to roam seamlessly between the APs within a few milliseconds of duration. So to do this testing, we used RF enclosures where we placed APs in 2 different RF enclosures and client in another enclosure. And for sniffing purpose, we used our Candela box LAN forge. And we placed it in such a way that we could get packet captures from all the 3 devices. And then with the help of attenuation, we made sure the client is connected to AP1 initially, and then increase the attenuation near AP1 and decrease near AP2, so the client decided to roam to AP2. But unfortunately, it got disconnected by both the APs. Don't worry, we have our friend Packet Capture with us. So with the help of Packet Capture, we could see a reassociation request to the AP2. But in the process of waiting for the response from AP2, it actually got deauthenticated from AP1. So this is unfortunate for the client. Next, by the time it received the reassociation response from the AP2, as it is already disconnected from the AP1, it has sent a deauthentication to AP2 and started a fresh association with AP2. So with this behavior, there could be a larger user impact, especially if they are running any kind of real-time applications. So these are some of the few key findings from our testing, highlighting the observations from different features like MPSK, 802.11 KVR, Wi-Fi 7 client connectivity, and AP stability. From all this, we can say as a QA engineer, our job is similar to a crime scene investigator who makes use of different clues. But in our case, we use clues like station side logs, packet captures, AP side logs, testbed side logs, and many more. From all these, packet captures provide key evidences to most of the issues that we encountered in our testing. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirishin. So just now you mentioned, right, 11-hour roaming, the client got disconnected. What could be the reason? Did you get a chance to analyze that issue?
Yeah, for the packet captures, as we have seen earlier, we observed that the AP1 is initiating deauthentication. It is sending deauthentication frames to that particular client when it has sent the reassociation request, which is not expected.
But actually, that AP1 to AP2, right? Did this given information, the client information to the AP2? Did you analyze that information?
Sorry, can you please repeat?
For example, AP station is moving from AP1 to AP2, right? So AP1 has to give some information, that client information to AP2, so that the client can go and join with AP2. Did you analyze that AP is sending proper information, whether it's sending multicast or pull or push request? Based on that only, the AP will understand that, okay, I got this client information, I'm having PMK ID, everything, I have to start authentication. That thing, did you get a chance to analyze it?
Yeah, initially client has sent the FT authentication request and the AP2 send this response successfully. And then it has started this reassociation request and all. So from this process, it is clear that the client is actually trying to roam to AP2. But as you said, if AP1 is actually communicating with AP2, that related information we need to check, like from the frame level, if we could get anything like that.
Yes.
From our, as far as we tested and gone through a few articles, generally through this process, AP should not, the existing connector AP should not send any deauthentication frame to the connector clients.
Okay. Actually, that based on that couple of vendors, it will implement differently. Actually, APs 2 has to send a pull request to AP1 so that it will push it. This is a one way. Otherwise, AP1 should multicast whatever that the mobility domain, right? It has to send all the information, that client information to all the APs, so that whenever a client is trying to join to AP2, right? So that it will get already is having information to about a station, so it can go and connect with that without any issues. It could be the problem. You check it.
Okay, so as you said, it's a vendor specific. Yeah, we will go through it. Like, thank you for the information.
Okay, next question.
I just wanted to understand, does Candela product line support packet crafting in the sense that you can like change a PMK ID and to try it out to a reassociation with an AP? Is that supported in Candela's product line?
So, like changing the parameters you're talking about?
Yes, yes.
No, those are like we go for the standards only. So, how the AP is responding and how client is responding. So, when we talk about the traffic things, we have that reporting. You can say support. They can see if we run the traffic through PCAP, how it is running and all. But when it comes to tag parameters, we go with the standards.
Sure. What I mean is like we have this PCAP replay packet replay.
Okay.
Where I can change.
So we have that. We have that support. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we had that like corruptions and what are the things like for the handshake, which handshake you want to corrupt and which we want to reply do kind of re-attack multiple times. So those things we have in our land force. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, last question. Okay, if not, I'll ask. So the PMK ID issue that you mentioned, so is it like a widespread or can it be traced back to the specific AP vendor implementation?
So as PMKID usually having the details about the R0 and R1Es, right? So if we have roaming, for example, if we have a network of 5 APs, so if client is initially connected to AP1, so it will have the R0 key. So, and the other APs will derive the R1 keys from the R0 keys. So in that case, if AP, like client is getting roam to any specific AP and it is getting invalid PMKID, we can trace with the keys, like to which AP it is going, and that AP vendor we can reach out.
Okay. Thank you, Yash. Please give a round of applause for Yash, Maitri, and Shirisha. Thank you for the amazing session.